There it is. There, we got it. Guys, welcome to our event this evening. My name is Joel Reinisch. I'm the criminal justice professor here at Dakota Wesleyan University. Introducing the chief of police with the Rapid City Police Department, Don Hedrick. Don is a 2002 graduate of Dakota Wesleyan out of the criminal justice program here, a proud alum. MBA from USD, currently working on his PhD at Johns Hopkins. And has been at the Rapid City Police Department now since 2002, just hit his 20-year mark. He spoke earlier today to some of our students about policing in the future, and today he's going to speak about violent crime and the challenges that come with that. And shameless plug for Don, in my criminal justice classes here at Dakota Wesleyan, I speak a ton about the great work that Rapid City Police Department's doing out there with their community policing and those sorts of things as well too. He spoke about that today, but really truly they are innovative with the things that they're doing out there, and a lot of that has to do with this guy right here. So please help me in welcoming Don Hedrick.
Okay, how's everybody doing tonight? And raise a hands who is here this morning. Anybody? Oh, any of the kids here? No? Okay, I didn't scare anybody off. All right. Well, honestly, it is a true honor to be back here in Mitchell at Dakota Wesleyan. And I mean, I spent a lot of time with Joel, the Joels, today. And I just want to say thanks to both of them. You know, this place has changed a lot in 20 years, but the welcoming folks and the welcoming people here, that has not changed. It's still very real, and just the feeling of like getting a hug when you walk in the door, when people are shaking your hand, that's something I remember when I think back about Dakota Wesleyan 20 years ago. I remember how people treated me. And it's pretty clear that that's still a priority here in this place, and you guys got to be proud of that. And got to spend a little bit of time with some of the criminal justice kids at lunch, and it's pretty clear there's some sharp people here at the school, and I'm excited to see what they're going to do and what they're going to bring to the criminal justice field. So, you know, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about some of the things that we're doing in Rapid City, and I think it's important to note that, you know, what we're doing that might appear to be working in Rapid City, none of these programs are cookie cutter. You know, what's working in Rapid might not work in Albuquerque, or what's working in Los Angeles isn't going to work probably in Rapid City. You have to take a lot of this stuff and tailor it to the needs, because every community is different. And everybody has their own unique issues. So just a real quick story on the car here, 67 Belvedere. This was sitting in a field not so long ago, all rusted out, and we had an officer tow it. I think he bought it for a couple $100 and got it towed to Rapid City and said, I have this vision, I want to remodel this car, and I said, okay, run with it. Let's see what happens. And we had folks from the community step up, and some of the detail shops volunteered and donated time, and we took a crashed Dodge Charger, a new vehicle, and put all the engine and parts into this thing, and kind of, you know, my thought was, if we're going to do it, we're going to make it a real acting, usable patrol car. So there are guys that take this thing out on the street and use it, and it's fun. You get a lot of looks, and it's been a really good engagement piece. So anyway, that's the story behind that. Let's see. My tech support. Okay, well, that's all right. We'll roll with it anyways. Okay, we made it happen. Tech support, thank you. So, you know, I won't spend a ton of time on this. When I started at the police department, we had about 100 officers, and this was 20 years ago. Right now, we're authorized to have about 160 police officers, and we are trying to hire about 30 right now. And so, shameless plug, we're hiring. If you know good people, send them our way. And I would say 17 of those 30 positions are growth throughout the department. We tried to add 12. However, we ran into this time, very challenging time that we're in, where we have law enforcement officers that are leaving the profession, and that's a nationwide trend. I spent a little bit of time, we have a Chiefs and Sheriffs Conference that happens every year. Some have attended that. But we did something new where we had some North Dakota police chiefs come in, and it was interesting just to hear everybody's facing the same challenges right now with that are happening nationwide. We're feeling that in South Dakota. Uptick in crime, uptick in violence, officers leaving the profession in general. So we're in kind of a challenging time right now, but I have hope for the future. So just real quick, I'll just mention our department's kind of broken into 3 different divisions. You have the patrol division, which is essentially your police officers that wear the uniform and drive the black and white car. And you have the detectives. Those are the guys that investigate crimes after the fact and put a case together. And also that falls in our detective division is our evidence lab. And we have I want to say 12 staff members that specifically focus on evidence. We've had some pretty major crimes get solved through DNA. Just this last year, we had an elderly lady get murdered in her home, and it really shocked the community because this was somebody that was upstanding and lived in an area where there wasn't a lot of crime. And I have to say, without the DNA evidence that our folks obtained, that case might have went unsolved. They found some DNA from an individual that really had no business being in that house, and we were able to work it back and put a case together. And on a side note, we just solved a case from the 70s through DNA. We were finally able to get a DNA match from a murder in the 70s, and even though the suspect is now deceased, at least we were able to bring some closure to the family. So our evidence folks are doing some pretty amazing work on that end. And then we have our support services, and that's kind of everybody that keeps the machine rolling behind the scenes. Our hiring, our training, our records, our technology staff, folks that manage our vehicle fleet, our accreditation. I'll spend a little time on that here in a minute. And some of the grants that we're bringing in to bring in new equipment, new officers, and such. We do have a wellness program. That's something over the last couple of years that we've really focused on. While we're dealing with this trend of folks leaving the profession, it's so important that we keep good people, keep good people in the department so that they can keep doing the job. Because every time you bring in, somebody new or somebody from outside the area, you never fully know, what you're going to get, honestly. So it's really important to make sure we keep the folks that are doing the job and that have that experience happy. So we've really invested in our wellness program, kind of have this mantra of take care of yourself so you can continue to take care of others. And probably one of the biggest pieces of that puzzle is our in-house psychologist. We have a doctor in our building, free to utilize. We utilize him to do a assessment of people that are coming in to make sure they're a good fit for the job. But also if somebody's struggling or has an issue, the doc is there. And we've trained folks from all levels of our department in kind of a peer support type of model where folks from all levels are able to recognize when somebody's struggling, and they might not be a doctor, but they can get our people connected up with people that can help them. And I don't have a line of officers outside of my door saying, hey, I'm having a tough time. Like, that doesn't really happen, but they will go and talk to a coworker or a peer about, hey, I went to this awful call and terrible thing I saw, and then that officer is trained up to get them help. All right. Okay. So I just want to spend a minute on our accreditation. Right now we are the only law enforcement agency in the state that's accredited, and we're proud of that. We've been accredited for over 30 years. way back when, Chief Hennies in the 90s said, we're going to be accredited, and I think most people at the time had no idea what that meant, just saw it as a bunch of extra work. But for somebody like me, this accreditation's been incredibly valuable. Essentially what we're doing is we are subjecting ourselves to a review from an independent third party that comes in and goes through our department with a fine-tooth comb and tries to find, what we could be doing better or differently, and holding us up against best practices that are occurring. Back in 2020, so I took over as the chief in 2020, and not knowing what was lying ahead of me with a pandemic and civil unrest and some of the issues that we've worked through. But we ran into this thing where we were having many protests in Rapid City, just like everywhere else. I'm sure there was probably even some in Mitchell, I would imagine. And we had a group that was very vocal, and they were really demanding this set of 8 rules. It was called 8 Can't Wait. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but essentially it was these 8 policies that they were demanding that our department move forward on. And it was really handy for me to be able to simply, when they'd say, hey, you need a de-escalation policy, I'd say, yep, here it is. Or, hey, you need to have a policy on chokeholds, and they'd say, yeah, it's right here. Here you go. And what I'm saying is we were already ahead of the game in that way because our accreditation required us to be. And I don't know anything different. I've never worked in a department that wasn't accredited. And, when I was a young sergeant, I was kind of in charge of our TASER program. TASERs were new. And, it was my job to bring them in and get everybody trained. And so we had a smaller department next to us that had, I don't know what you'd call it, a mishap with their TASER. And they tased somebody that shouldn't have been tased, essentially. So they called and asked if I'd come in and take a look at their program and maybe give some suggestions. And for us, it was pretty common where we would review at high-risk incidences and do a little review and talk about what could have went better, what we did poorly, what we could do better, and then compile that all into a report at the end of the year to figure out what we need to train on. Like that was normal. We just do it. Every time you use a TASER, you fill out a report. So I went to the agency and I'm like, okay, can I see your TASER checkout? And they're like, there's no such thing. Well, can I see your TASER review? And they're like, no, we don't do that. And that's when it kind of hit me, the value of having a third party come in and review what we're doing, and also the value of reviewing some of these high liability type of issues, because you're almost continually trying to improve upon what you're currently doing. So anyways, our accreditation has been a lifesaver for me, honestly. Let's see. Okay, so the title of this talk had to do with violence, correct? I just thought it would be helpful to point out we're not going to go through all these numbers. I probably shouldn't have even used this slide, but I went through this back in May. We had a very vocal group putting out very distorted numbers, and so I went before the community and before the media and talked a little bit about what's going on in Rapid City, what's going on in our state versus what's going on in our nation, and really just tried to acknowledge that, yeah, we had an uptick in violence over the last few years. It's a fact. But as that continued to rise in 2021 and 2022 across the nation, luckily for us, most of our violent crimes were trending downwards. And aside from homicide, we're trending downwards still to this day, which is good. We saw an uptick that much of the nation saw. Much of the nation continued to rise, and we continued to work through it. And, I'll add a couple things. Crimes of violence at times can be very tough to interrupt. Many times they happen behind closed doors. Many times they happen, not out in a place where an officer can intervene unless they're standing on every single corner, and that's just not feasible. We spent a lot of time with our homicide suspects reviewing and analyzing the histories and how did they get to this point. And what we found is that many of the folks that are engaging in these crimes of violence are already involved in the system. Like they're already on probation, already on parole, or already out on bond from a crime that they've committed and waiting for trial to occur. And so that's led us to have some very positive conversations with leadership in our state. Spent a lot of time with the secretary that has oversight over DOC and parole recently, and I can't say this is all fixed, but at least it's trending in the right direction, where we're taking some of the folks that had been arrested multiple times for the same things and really dialing in on that, not allowing people to continue to commit crimes of violence over and over and over. And essentially that's a strategy we've utilized here recently. I'll leave time for questions on all this, I promise, okay? Okay, so, I talked about a challenging time. You guys are all aware of the last couple of years and how they went. One thing I've really encouraged our people when times are tough is to remember their why. Remember what brought you to this profession. Because it has the tendency, if you can think back to that, it can pull you out of the negativity that might be around you. People ask me, like, why do you do it? And my why is simple. It's simple. I want a better place for my kids and everybody else's families. That's it. That's what brings me back. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. That's what keeps me moving forward. And this is probably something you can take from tonight if you wanted. Remember your why, what got you into doing what you're doing, and it can help move you forward. So I actually do this exercise where I make people write it down, and I won't have you do that, but it seems to be helpful. I've had people comment on how some of our officers have been, this has been a helpful exercise for them. Okay. Have you ever been pulled over? No? Good for you. Okay, there's a few honest people in here. I have too, by the way. It's happened. Twice? Yeah, you look like trouble. Okay. Fair enough. There you go. No one's going to give you a ticket, right? Okay, so why do I have this slide up here? Well, I think it's important for our officers to remember that every one of you that has been pulled over, you guys all remember that vividly, right? You remember the fear you felt. You remember, oh my God, am I going to get a ticket? You remember how the officer treated you. You remember his actions, am I right? And it sticks with you because to you, that is an extremely quasi-traumatic experience, right? And I tell our folks to think back on that and remember that, because they're going to remember that interaction probably the rest of their life. And I tell our officers, in that moment, you have the ability to influence what people think. You have the ability in that moment. You're not just representing yourself, you're representing the department, and at times you're representing law enforcement in general, and that's something you shouldn't take lightly. And I really harp on treating folks with respect, okay? Sometimes people earn that ticket or whatever, right? Like, you're going to get a ticket sometimes if you earned it, okay? I have. It happens. But overall, people will remember if you're respectful or not. And I have a really good example of that. We got a minute, right? So I'll tell a quick story in regards to this, and I tell our new officers this story. So do you guys remember back in 2014 when there was all this cartel action happening in like Juarez, and people were getting beheaded, and you guys, you know what I'm talking about? Remember that? So what did we decide to do? We went on a vacation to Mexico. Me and my wife and a good partner, couple, friend of ours, we went down there, stayed at an all-inclusive resort, and we were driving. It was about an hour south of Cancun, so you fly into Cancun, you drive through the jungle about an hour, and then we got to our resort on the coast. And, I remember seeing the armed guards standing there, and I'm like, oh, okay, I feel safe. These guys look like they mean business, and honestly, no issues. That week went by, it was great. It was a fun time. Got to hang out with our good friends, and then it comes to be the last day. And you all know what it's like at the end of a vacation. You just want to like push a button and be back home. If you could like hit fast forward through the travel, because you know you're already thinking to all the stuff you have to do, and maybe you're sunburned and a little bit tired, and you just want to be home in your own bed. We've all been there, right? I got a few blank stares here. Okay, you've been there? All right. So that's where I was in that moment. And we called for a cab to come take us back to the airport. And this minivan pulls up, and we pile in, and what's the mode when you're in, like, is it code white when you're not paying any attention? Is that what, I don't know. We learned that at the academy. I wasn't in police mode, I guess I should say. I was very much in just get me home mode. And so me and my buddy sit in the back seat, and the wives sit in the middle seat, and the driver's up front by himself, and away we go past the armed guards through, the gates close behind us, and we're into the jungle, heading back for this hour ride to the Cancun airport. And it becomes very apparent that the driver is like burning a hole through the rearview mirror at me, like staring. My buddy elbows me and says, "That guy's staring at you." And I'm like, whatever. And I look up, and sure enough, yeah, he is clearly staring at me. And it's this awkward silence, and the ladies can kind of feel the awkwardness, so they start trying to strike up a conversation with this fella who doesn't speak English very well, and he's not having it. Like one-word responses, and we get about 10 minutes in, and he finally just looks up and says, "How's Rapid City?" And, I'm thinking, like, our luggage maybe had Rapid City on it or whatever. I'm trying to, like, justify this or whatever. And, yeah, you've been to Rapid City? Oh, yeah, I've been to Rapid City. Julie Oberlander is the news reporter, and the Mount Rushmore Taco Bell, I worked on that, and we're like, holy crap, this guy's been to Rapid City, like, clearly. He knows intimate details. And it's, again, dead, awkward silence. And when he says, how's the police department, all bets are off the table. This guy knows, and he knows what I do. He knows who I am. And then my mind starts thinking, am I going to have to choke this guy out doing 70 miles an hour? And if he pulls off, into the jungle, like, something's going to have to happen here. Like, all of a sudden, you're very much in police mode. And, we all try really hard to talk to him, and he is not having it. And I can tell you, I've never been so excited to see the lights of a city up ahead on the horizon. And nobody talked the whole rest of the way. Awkward, cold sweat, silence the whole rest of the way. It was terrible. But we get to the airport and breathe a sigh of relief and jump out of the vehicle, and I go around back to grab our bags, and he meets me back there. And he says, I've been thinking about it. I probably should be thanking you. And I still have no clue who this guy is, no idea. He said, that was the worst night of my life. Since then, I've been able to change things. I got a job. I'm back here. I'm connected with family. Probably should be thanking you. However, if your partner was here, this would have taken a very much different turn, and we wouldn't have went to the airport, let me say that. And he's like, I just remember, thank you for being respectful. He shook my hand, and we ran, literally ran away from this place into the airport. And I still, on the flight back, our friends are like, what was that? What was that? Astronomical odds. All the cab drivers in Mexico, I run into the one who I ran into many years ago, and I started to remember. I remembered the incident. He had assaulted his significant other. There was a knife involved. We chased him through the alley. I remember who my partner was at the time, this guy he was talking about. That guy ended up losing his job for totally different reasons, but yeah, he was a jerk. So, I tell that story beside the astronomical odds, but remember to treat folks with respect, because they're going to remember it. They'll remember how you treated them. And Rapid City's small enough. It's big enough, but it's small enough. And I've done the diaper run at 2 in the morning to Walmart, and I've done the same thing where I've come face to face with somebody I encountered years ago, and you lock eyes, and you both remember that moment right now. You remember what happened. And you give each other that nod and go the other way, but they remember how you treated them. And so I tell that long rambling story because folks will remember, so treat them with respect. Okay, so I spent just a little bit of time on this morning. I'll touch on it again. A lot of the programs that we've implemented over the last couple years have to do with acknowledging trauma. Acknowledging that historical trauma is very real and it exists. The minute we're able to do that, we're able to start moving forward and de-escalate situations. It happens time and again. And, I think I also told this morning. I could remember when I was a brand new police officer and I hadn't had hardly any contact with Native Americans, especially in a law enforcement capacity, until I moved out to Rapid City. And just remembering the amount of distrust and trauma that existed as I was trying to help people. And I remember thinking 20 years ago, it'd be great if I could skip through all that trust building and just get right to the helping. And I'm not saying we have it all figured out or fixed. Historical trauma still exists, but we're in a much better spot than what we were. And that's because we invited the community in. We invited Native American elders, historians, folks that lived in boarding schools to come and talk to us about their experience, talk to us why that distrust exists. And for us, I know that that's been a positive thing. One, recognizing what it is when you see it. Oh, I'm dealing with that. That's what this is. I'm going to take a step back and de-escalate as opposed to ratchet things up and escalate. And it's been helpful for our folks. It's been helpful for our community. It's been a really good partnership. And a lot of our programs that I'm going to talk about center around that philosophy. Did I talk about handle with care this morning? I'm going to talk about it. I got a minute, right? Okay. So handle with care. As mentioned, I went back to school and I learned about this really cool program that was happening in New Jersey where when first responders encountered a kiddo that had experienced some sort of trauma that night, whatever the case might be, they just shoot a quick note to the school and say, "Little Jimmy, handle with care." No details, just this kid dealt with a tough thing last night. So if he's acting out or if he's falling asleep because he was up all night, that's why, so that the school can treat them with a counseling approach as opposed to a disciplinary, double down on the discipline hammer, and it's been going really well. We've received a lot of positive feedback from the school, and it's something I hope we can keep going. So trying to take some of that schooling that I'm doing and applying it to real life. Okay. So the point of this slide is to talk about our community-based crime reduction. So what is that? Community-based. It's another word for hotspot policing. When we have an issue in a neighborhood that pops up where we have a large amount of crime or a large amount of violence, we utilize the traditional methods. We flood the area with police officers, we stop people, we intervene, we take guns off the street, we make arrests. We do all of that, but we also pair it with community engagement. We have folks that go out into the community. One of the people we hired was a former artist. He's not a police officer, he's like a painter. He paints murals and things, and his job is to go out into the community and make connections. Find out what's important to the people living there. Find out what they want us to focus on. Put together neighborhood watches, and it's amazing. His name is Tyler, and when people first told me about this idea, I was like, we're going to do what? We're going to bring this artist in? How's that going to work? But Tyler does an amazing job working on the trust component, working on what's important, engaging with the youth. He came to me last summer. We had this area town that was being hit by record levels of violence. And he said, I want to do equine therapy. I was like, okay, you're going to tell me what that is, first off, but, you know, we trusted him and let him run with it, and he brought in horses, and the youth, and particularly our Native American youth, had this connection, and people from all over multiple neighborhoods came, and it was this time of healing, and there was prayers, and I'm like, nice job, Tyler. I never would have thought of that in a million years. So, you know, ideas like that, keep them coming, because you know, we got to try some different things. You know, what we've been doing isn't necessarily always working when it comes to making those engagements. Okay, real quick, I want to touch on Journey On. Back in 2020, it was a summer day. I think it was July. Very hot, very busy, and sometimes on my lunch break, I got to just get out of the office for a minute, okay? Like, just got to go for a walk or a run, a jog, get some fresh air. It's good for the mind, good for the body. So I did that. I just blocked out some time and went for it. Just started running and went up this busy road in Rapid City. And I encountered these two fellas that were next to the side of the road. And it was clear they probably were homeless, they were probably intoxicated, snoring, and they're right next to the road. So I'm like trying to roll them, and it's you know, dead weight, and here I am in like my, you know, jogging shorts or whatever, and I'm trying to think in my mind, who could I call? Because I knew they just needed a ride, and traditionally that has fallen on the police department to give folks rides. And, you know, I go through this like little Rolodex in my mind. Oh, Rolodex, that's like a thing where you used to keep track of phone numbers. And anyways, I'm going through this in my head trying to figure out, like, who can I call? You know, does this really require a police officer? Because it didn't. And, you know, I go through all this list of people, and I can't think of anybody, so I call, and after a while, a uniformed officer shows up, and he's kind of looking at me like, really, Chief? Like, you know how busy we are? And I'm like, yes. Look, man, we can't just leave them here. Like, we can't, they're going to get hurt or roll into the road. So anyways, he escorts the one gentleman into his car, and I'm not dressed like a police officer. I help him get into the car. They're both friendly and nice and happy and just needed a ride to sober up. And the whole time I'm like, wouldn't it be great if we had a partner in this? Wouldn't it be great if we had somebody that would be interested in helping us with some of this? Because right now it doesn't exist. It's simply a police officer's job, and there's a whole list of reasons why that isn't always the best. You know, one, that trauma I mentioned. Many times folks that are homeless have encountered law enforcement in not so positive of a way, and sometimes a uniform just showing up can change the dynamic of the interaction. That's just one. Two, maybe you're stigmatizing and criminalizing an issue that isn't necessarily, you know, it's a social issue. So anyways, I did some research on it. I tried to leverage some of my schoolwork that I'm doing to find out what other places are doing, and I learned about Eugene, Oregon, and how folks from the community have partnered with law enforcement to take some of these calls for service. Learned about the Denver STAR program, very similar, where they have a group of folks that show up and try to handle some of these calls for service. And Albuquerque, the list goes on, and I researched it, and I put it all together, and I brought it to some people in our community, and they're like, you're crazy. It's never going to work. You're nuts. And I'm here to tell you that we found a Native American outreach group. We started working with them in December, so we're coming up on a year. And since then, they have handled over 10,000 calls for service that would have normally went to a police officer. And that's amazing. I would argue they're even probably handling it not only in a different way, but probably in a better way. Because if we were to make that transport, like those two guys I was talking about, we drove them somewhere, dropped them off, and we're out. We move on to the next call. But when Journey On does it, they do the follow-up. They try to get individuals that want to get out of that lifestyle connected with resources, connected up with service providers. They go back the next day to make sure that the individuals make it to the appointment that they needed to get to. Essentially, boots on the ground social work is what is occurring there, and it's been a good experiment. We've worked really closely with them to make sure nobody gets hurt. Helping them to recognize when they're dealing with something that's beyond their ability and they need to call for a police officer, or, hey, this is a major medical issue, we need an ambulance here. And they're to that point now where they understand that. And I wouldn't say it went without any bumps or bruises, but overall, it's going really, really, really well. Yeah, I'm gonna shift gears here and turn it over to you guys a little bit. I want to know what's interesting to you. Obviously, I could stand up here all day and talk about Rapid City. I'm clearly, proud of the work that we're doing and proud of the officers that we have doing the job, and proud of our department. But yeah, I want to know what you have questions on. This crowd looks like a crowd that isn't afraid to ask a question or two. I think the lady in pink back there probably has one, I would guess. See, I knew you'd have a question.
On public radio, I heard about the program that you've started in Rapid City between the police department and one of the reservations. I think you were talking about that.
Yeah.
Tell me how that is working.
Yeah, well,
or tell us.
Yeah, so it's very brand new. We signed essentially a memorandum with the Oglala Sioux tribe. Traditionally a tribe that is very, very proud of their jurisdiction and hasn't been very interested in signing anything. And this simply has to do with, over the last couple years, they've called us and said, hey, we have this major thing happening. We have a bad guy holed up in a house and we don't have the gear or the equipment or the training to deal with it in a safe way. Will you send some people? And we're kind of like, oh, geez, that's a whole, that's essentially its own sovereign nation. And we're sending, are our folks going to be protected if something bad happens? So essentially what that is it's an agreement that if they call and ask for help, we'll do what we can, but they're not going to throw our people in jail or whatever the case might be. And we've had law enforcement between both entities has always had a strong relationship, despite jurisdictions, despite political issues. We've always worked together well with our tribal police officers, and I'll give you a couple examples. L&I, major tournament that occurs in Rapid City. People from all over the state and all reservations come. It's an awesome event. It's not just basketball anymore. They're doing all sorts of things like wrestling and hand games and art, and it's this huge event. And for many years, we've partnered with our tribal police officers to come down and partner with us. And you wouldn't believe what a great impact that has when the tribal officers can say, hey, Billy, knock it off, because they know him, and it immediately de-escalates the situation, where if our officers were to engage, it could ratchet things up. So that partnership we've had for a long time, and essentially it's kind of making it more official. When they come up to help, they're covered. We have this agreement where we're going to work together on things like that. So nobody has given up any sort of sovereignty or anything like that. It's just an agreement that we agree to help each other when we need to. If you can really dumb it down, that's what it is.
I have a question. I've watched some trainings on crisis intervention teams and utilizing mental health agencies to assist in different events that you might get called to. And I'm just curious about if you do that. I know you said you have a psychologist on staff, but I'm wondering if you utilize any community mental health groups to do that.
Yes, good question. Co-response is kind of the term that's being used, where police show up with somebody trained with mental health expertise. That's another program that's happening. We're dabbling with it. We have our quality of life team is something that we stood up a couple years ago, and essentially we have 2 police officers that are doing some street outreach. identifying who our high users are and identifying people that maybe could utilize some help, and then trying to connect them with resources. Well, that quality of life team, these two police officers, they're essentially doing social work. And you might ask, why are police officers doing social work? And the answer is because we don't have somebody that's physically out on the street doing that social work. And a long way of answering your question, but our quality of life unit has partnered with BMS, Behavior Management System, folks that have that expertise, and we're just starting to bring them into the action a little bit more, bringing them to calls for service. And just a couple nights ago, we had an individual up at a hotel, had a machete, was threatening to hurt himself. They're trying to talk to him through the door. We called the psychologist, got him up there, got some advice on what to say. So it's a resource that we're utilizing. All of our officers have had some level of crisis intervention training, and we feel like that's just so important towards de-escalation. But sometimes, folks make decisions that take that step out of our hands, and that's unfortunate. But we want to at least make sure our folks have the right tools to utilize when we're dealing with stuff like that. Good, that's an awesome question. You bet.
Don, I've heard that, in fact, I heard the police chief of Camden, New Jersey say in an interview that he would give up 10 police officers for one more Boys and Girls Club. And I couldn't believe it. I thought, really? That was, have you seen that kind of powerful impact of some of these social agencies that, like Boys and Girls Club of America?
Oh my gosh. The people that work for those entities are saints. I've had the chance to partner with the Club for Boys, for example, in Rapid City for many years, serve on their board, volunteer at events for them just because of the gap that they're filling in our community, the lack of mentorship, the lack of role models, positive role models. I'll walk in there in uniform on a summer day when they have 400 kids, and they are just hanging on you, flocking on you, want the attention, want to talk about what's going on in their life, wanting some acknowledgement. And we do this event at the Club for Boys where we bring in fishermen from all over the country, and they partner with a kiddo and take them fishing. It's hard to describe because one, that event where they get to fish with this guy, this pro fisherman, might be the literal only opportunity for one-on-one time that they've ever had with an adult. Believe it or not, that's it. And it's amazing to see these big, tough fishermen break down and cry when it's time to part ways and the kids don't want to go and they don't want to go. It's like heart-wrenching, but they come back every year because it's such an amazing experience and this connection that they build with the kiddos. So a long way answering that, but we have an extreme need for more mentoring. One of the other programs that I'm currently researching through my schoolwork is this street outreach that occurs when in some places where they identify individuals that are heading down the wrong path. Okay, maybe they've been involved maybe they've been injured and put in the hospital through gang violence, or maybe they just got out of jail or prison, and they're identifying individuals and going straight to them and saying, guess what, I'm your mentor, and here's how we're going to do this. And really working to help them stay on the right path. And there are success stories out of that. I think there's a lot of room for growth in that area in our community, and we've been kind of feeling out some of our Native American mentorship partners that are out there and seeing if they'd be willing, like, hey, we've identified this guy, he's heading down the wrong path, or this youth, or this kiddo, can you help us out? Can you get in there and explain what might happen if they retaliate? Folks that have lived that life can speak about it. I lived it. Here's what happened when I retaliated. Here's how that negatively impacted my life moving forward. I mean, they can talk about it in a way that I never could. And we have folks like that in our community that are interested, and I think that could be one of the next things that we get rolling. So, good question. What else? How about some of our younger folks in the room here? You got to have a burning question. Well, what have you always wanted to ask? You probably don't hang out with police chiefs every day. Or what do you want to know about?
What were you looking for? What's the biggest thing you're looking for when you're looking for a new recruit or a new hire coming out?
Oh, excellent question. So there's 3 different ways that you can get into the Rapid City Police Department. One, there's an educational requirement. If you don't have that, military experience requirement. If you don't have that, law enforcement experience requirement, or a combination thereof. So many of our folks either have military experience, or they've worked at other departments somewhere, or they have a degree. Very common. But one thing that really stands out, and especially in this day and age, is when somebody has some volunteerism on their resume. We talk a lot about our mission statement, community first. That's a way where a new applicant could say, yeah, I'm living your mission statement, community first, service above self. I'm doing it already through the work that I'm volunteering in. And it doesn't take a lot. Like, we're not talking about you have to give up your life and, hang out at a charity, but every single day. But, I think even if you just do it a few times, you'll find how that makes you feel. It makes you feel good that you're helping, and you'll want to go back and do it more. And for us, I think, this day and age, it's not always as common as what you would think it might be. Folks are busy. Everybody has things going on, and when somebody's able to highlight how they're already working to help others, I think that's pretty cool. Hopefully that's helpful. You thinking of applying? I got some paperwork here. If
Don, how did your Dakota Wesleyan education prepare you for what you do?
Oh, good question. Good question. One, I think I had an amazing criminal justice advisor. I just got to see him again after many years. Joel got to see him too. Mike McGreevy was back around, and he just made a guest appearance here at Dakota Wesleyan, and Joel called me up and said, hey, Mike's headed your way. And I said, awesome. And, I just think about, I was a young guy back then, and, I was probably a little bit lost and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And just the amount of grace that he had and compassion. And like I say that, I think back of this place and think about all the amazing people I met and the caring that was so apparent. And Mike exemplified that. Like, I had a funeral I had to go back home for, and I was so nervous, I'm going to miss this test. Am I going to fail? And he just looked at me like, go, you're fine. Go handle that business, and we'll be here when you get back. And it was just, I'll never forget the way I was treated by people like him. And maybe that's almost just as important as the education that I received here. And that was awesome too, by the way. Built the cornerstone for a lot of the things that I've worked on. So it seems like a lot of good things happening here still to this day, and that's pretty amazing. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
Do you know what percentage of police departments carry accreditation?
I don't.
Does carrying accreditation lower insurance premiums?
No, that's a legit question, and the answer to that is I don't know. I think we just decided we're going to do it and keep doing it because for us it was a good fit, and I've listed just a few examples of how we've seen the impact and the benefit. And yeah, there's more paperwork, and yeah, there's an expense to it, and not super fun when the folks come in and they're got the clipboard out and going through all of your stuff and your programs and your rules and procedures, and then I have to sit down with them and get grilled. I mean, it's not fun, but if you look at it and take a step back, big picture, we feel like it's the right thing for us to keep doing, and I think it's really helped us stay cutting edge and ensuring that we're utilizing best practices. So I got to imagine even having, I guess what I'm trying to say in a long rambling way is that having some of those policies, procedures, and practices in place have probably saved us in the long run anyways, because we're held to a standard of best practices, if that makes sense. So.
How about women in your force?
Yeah.
What do women do, and how do you?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you this. It takes a special person to do this job, but it takes an incredibly special woman to do this job. I mean, to get kicked and spit on, and I mean, you got to, we're so thankful that we have people that want to do it. And just over the last couple years, we picked some of our more senior female officers and said, hey, we want you to run a recruiting program. We want you to just take this and run with it. What do you want to do? You want to have an open house for just female applicants? Let's do it. Of course, anybody could show up, but they kind of phrased it towards women in law enforcement, and it was a huge success. I mean, we had people coming out of the woodwork, and I think that next hiring cycle we hired like 8 women, which is not common. And we did let them run with some posters and stuff, and they're doing, like the Charlie's Angels poses, and Charlie's Angels is a show from the 70s. Anyways, so, I think empowering our women police officers, and let me tell you, I've seen some of the biggest, toughest, meanest guys completely crumple when a female officer breaks out the big sister voice and tells them to sit down and shut up, and you're like, oh my gosh, that guy did it, because they have a way of talking to people, and especially when it comes to victims, they have a way of connecting with victims that, let's face it, guys, we're just not as good at communication at times, and particularly crimes that occur against women. You're obviously going to have a much better impact if the officer is a female. And when it comes to things like our domestic violence and sexual assault, we have female detectives that are a part of that. So incredibly, I want to say 18, which still doesn't quite, not even close to reflecting we want our department to reflect our community. We're not quite there. Same thing with our Native American population. We do not have enough Native American police officers. It's something we get dinged on our accreditation every year, but then it's our job to explain what we're trying to do and how we try to reach out. Our Native American police officers get called some very terrible things by Native Americans, and we've had guys that their families have turned their backs on them, so they have this tough job, and then they go home and they don't have any support, and then so I've really tried hard when I get the opportunity to talk to our Native American groups. I'm like, how do we hold these folks up? How do we hold the officers up that are doing the job? And because it's important. I can remember I was a training officer many years ago, and so I'd been around, right? Like I was senior or whatever, and I worked on the side of town with a Native American officer. He's brand new, and never failed. If we were dealing with a Native American, they would just go straight to him because they felt more comfortable with him. Even though I was like the senior guy, they had a connection with Mitch that I couldn't have. And so what do we do? How do we hold them up? And it's challenging because you'll say, hey, Anthony, I want you to come do this commercial. And they're like, I'm not doing that. I just want to do my job. I don't want to be the face of the PD. I just want to work and do my job and go home. So you're dealing with very humble people in that way also. So yeah, if you guys have the answers, you should write a book, and make millions of dollars, but we're open to ideas. We've tried really tried to branch out and engage and meet where we can to talk about that need. Something that we strive for. But yeah, it's a work in progress for sure. So, what do you think, Joel? Got one more question, or do we got to wrap it up?
One more.
One more?
And I'm going to ask it.
Okay.
So today, I don't think we have a lot of carryover. That was at your presentation today, but you told the cricket story today.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that.
A valuable perspective, I think, for anybody. I know we got a couple criminal justice kids in here, and you kind of talked about it early on. It's about how you treat people, but
yeah.
I think if you can tell your story and your perspective.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. I didn't know if I didn't want to tell all the same things to if there were people that came to both. And I saved the Mexico story for this crowd because it's late night and R-rated or what. I don't know. Okay, so thank you, Joel. I'm going to take you back to 19 years ago when I was a brand new police officer working the night shift. That's where all the cool stuff happened, right? Like the action. Stuff that I thought was cool back then. Fights and stabbings and, just normal weekend night, okay? And it's in the summer. You got the windows rolled down. The calls are coming in. There's interesting calls in my mind at the time, and it's a very busy night. Call to call to call to call, and that was pretty common, and still kind of is at times. And not super uncommon for nights like that to just go by in a blink because you were so busy, and pretty soon the sun's coming up, and you're like, oh, I need to go to bed. I'm very tired. But this was about 2 in the morning at bar close. I was working in the north part of our town, and everyone just kind of drifted towards the downtown at bar close because there was always fights. People always get into drunken scuffles and things. It's a thing, okay? It happens. So, I'm kind of driving that direction, and I'm hearing the fights start to break out, and, all my buddies are going to do cool things, and I get this call on my way downtown. It's clear in the opposite direction, like almost out of town, this call, and it says, comes up on the computer screen, lady needs help with a cricket. That's what it said. That was it. That was all that was on there. And I'm like, well, that's dumb, right? Like, look at all this cool, interesting fights and things happening. I got to go to that. That's what I'm here for. And so anyways, I had the guts as a brand new officer to call the crusty old sergeant, the supervisor, who'd been there for like an eternity, okay? And he was tough and kind of mean, and you didn't mess with him. And I can't believe I called him, but I did. And I'm like, hey, did you hear about this cricket call? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, do I have to do that? He's like, yeah, that's what we do. And he hung up on me. And he might have swore at me. It could have happened. And, I'm like, okay, well, that was kind of a one-way conversation. I didn't even get to share my why, and he didn't care. He's go to the call. And so anyways, I turn around and start driving that direction, out of town, away from the cool stuff, and probably driving slower than I should have been and pouting or whatever you want to call it. But I walk up to the door, dragging my feet, knock on the door, and you'll never believe how big I felt in that moment, about this big, when a blind lady came to the door in tears. She hadn't slept in 3 days. This cricket was torturing her because she couldn't sleep because couldn't find it. She had no other friends or family to call. She had us. That was it. And incredibly humbling experience. And I'm glad it happened to me early on in my career. This not my job attitude, that was my job. And let me tell you, I handled that cricket, okay? I took care of that thing. It was done, no longer a problem. And I can't remember a single call from that first year of my employment. I can't. I'm sure I went to some interesting, awesome things. probably even some life-threatening things, but I can't remember them. But I will always remember that call, and I will always remember that person, that human I met that just needed help in that moment. And I stood there and talked to her for 20 minutes, despite everything else going on, and learned a really valuable lesson that day. And I tell our new officers that story as well, because not my job does not apply at our department or in law enforcement. We are the ones that can't say no. We are the ones that show up when people need it, no matter what it is, even if it's a cricket. So, yeah, that's the cricket story. Thanks for bringing that up, Joel. Yeah. Well, this has just been awesome. I've appreciated the day here. I've appreciated getting to see the school and all the changes, doing some amazing things. Jory and the Joels. Joe, nice to meet you. President's been awesome. Just really appreciate everybody, and it's been an honor to be on campus today, honestly, so it's been my pleasure.
All right, thank you.
Hey. Oh, thanks. Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much. Yep, absolutely. Glad to do it. Glad to do it. Yep.